I think science is an expression of human beings as much as any other part of culture is. You cannot escape knowledge. Science is knowledge. Do you think that if Newton had not existed and we had not learned about the gravitational forces or whatever it is, we would be better men? Nonsense. Knowledge is knowledge whichever way it's acquired. It's part of our culture. This is the scientific age. You cannot escape it. No one in the East can, no one in the West can. This is the scientific age. I think throughout history, man has believed that nature is economical of principles. It may be very prolific with structures. The essence of science is to go behind these structures and to remove layer after layer of all sorts of ignorance and all sorts of difficulties, and then come back to the elucidation of the fundamental principles. And that is the end of science, which we have surprisingly, if you like, always found to be true. If one looks at the world as we see it, it's a very diverse world. This diversity on the face of it seems so difficult to describe in terms of a few principles. The incredible thing is that in this century, we really believed till a few years ago that all this phenomena could be comprehended in terms of just four objects, four fundamental entities. We believed that all matter in the universe consisted of four types of chunks of matter. These are protons, neutrons, electrons, and neutrinos. And there were four types of fundamental basic forces between these four types of chunks of matter. There is the force of electromagnetism between electrically charged objects, the protons and the electrons. There is the weak nuclear force, which exists between pairs of any of these two of these four particles. And then there is the strong nuclear force, which exists only between protons and neutrons. And finally, the electrically charged objects, the protons and the electrons. There is the weak nuclear force, which exists between pairs of any of these two of these four particles. And then there is the strong nuclear force, which exists only between protons and neutrons. And finally, the gravitational force, which exists between all the four particles taken in pairs. The first one to be understood was the force which Newton had talked about, the force which binds us to Earth, the gravitational force. All phenomena on Earth were associated with the second force, the electromagnetic force. The phenomena of matter in its hardness, in its softness, the colors of various substances, all the phenomena associated with thunder, lightning. Incredible, the simplicity that the force between an electron and a proton is responsible for all this very, very diverse phenomena. Now came the big discoveries of the 20th century. The third force, the strong nuclear force, is something which we are not conscious of on Earth. It's a force which keeps a nucleus of protons and neutrons together. To see this force manifesting itself in its purest form, you've got to go to the stars. The sun is using this particular force to give us this vast quantity of radiation which is coming to us in the form of sunlight. And finally, there is the force which Madame Curie became conscious of first, the force of radioactivity, which makes a piece of radium transform itself into other elements. This is what we call the manifestation of the weak nuclear force. And what she was actually, now we know, seeing was the transformation of neutrons into protons plus electrons plus neutrinos. It's one of the great ideas of the 19th century. The beginning of the century, you had these two absolutely distinct forces, the electric force and the magnetic force. The electric force was produced by an electron, which we put on the table. In the space around it, you have the manifestation of the electric force. As soon as you begin to move the electron, you get a manifestation of the magnetic force. The magnetic force is not a fundamental thing. It's something which is connected with the electric force through the state of motion of the electron. The fact that these two forces went back to one fundamental origin was the unification which led to the concept of the electromagnetic force, to the name itself as well as to the concept of one single basic force. When I started research in 1949, one of the things which we gradually and slowly began to look for was the possibility of a further unification between the four forces which we knew at that time. We started to look for a unification between the electromagnetic force and the weak nuclear force. On the face of it, these two forces are very, very different. On the face of it, you are uniting what we call a long-range force, the electromagnetic force. By long range, I mean you can feel the effect of the electric force at almost any distance. You can put an electron on the table, and if you have sensitive enough instruments, you can see the effect of it 100 meters away, 1 mile away, if you wish. But not so with the nuclear forces. The nuclear forces are what we call short-range forces. And in particular, the weak nuclear force is a very short-range force. It manifests itself only and only if the proton and the neutron and the electron and the neutrino, which are participating in the force, are 10 to the minus 16 centimeters close to each other. This is an unimaginably short distance, something which we never come across in ordinary day life. When I speak of these distances of 10 to the minus 13 centimeters, short-range forces, long-range forces, and so forth, to me as a physicist, these are irrelevant. My task, if you like, is to go behind the reality of these short-range and long-range forces and to see the unity which exists between them. To give you an analogy of what we were trying to do, if you take ice and water, these can coexist at 0 degrees of temperature. One may think they are very distinct objects. They have a different shape, they have very different properties, and so on. However, if you increase the temperature, you find that they represent the same fundamental reality, the same fluid. Likewise, we thought that if you could conceive of a universe which was very, very hot,